So good evening and welcome to our last Zoom session, in-person session. Let me tell you what we're going to do tonight, and then I'll be open to questions. And I'll tell you some of the things that came up in our 4 o'clock session. First of all, the conclusion of this cohort will happen in September 30th, which is the last which will be the final time for finishing the Canvas course. And then all the requirements based on reviewing the Zoom videos and then filling out your log for the most important things that you learned when you were watching those. And then by October 15th, all certificates will be sent to those people who have successfully completed and done a really good job on the Canvas course, following the rubric and responding thoughtfully to the questions, as well as reading other people's comments, following the announcements, and doing the final assignment, which I'll go over in a little bit. After the level 1 certificate, someone asked me on email if you had to renew them. And so the certificate level 1, you don't have to, there's no time limit for renewing it. And we'll go over the reason that is related to professionalism and the national standards. The other thing that came up 2 weeks ago was in an IEP meeting, there was actually an issue related to eligibility for extended year services in an IEP and who's eligible and how they determine that. So I met with Kim Fratto, who is the coordinator at USBE over special ed. She gave me a resource that we're going to use in the Canvas course and that I sent you. And you can download it from the Canvas course and use it. And this does not apply to summer school. So summer school is open to everybody. The extended year service issue is based on a series of complicated data. And she actually, Kim actually sent me the link to the technical assistance manual that will really help you better understand what the situation is with students in an IEP and how their criteria for them being eligible. The other thing is when the new application is designed for the second cohort, which would be cohort 2024, cohort 2025, the application will be sent not just to the district people, the ALS people, the Title I people. It'll also be sent to all of you. So if you actually want to recruit people to send in their application for the next cohort, paraprofessionals, people in family literacy and adult education, to really expand the group, then, the application will be sent to you as well, besides the resettlement agency people and, other organizations, community organizations, adult education as well. And again, the advanced course, we just sent out the contract to see if there's a company who can provide the 30 to 40 hour virtual online second level certification. And people who are eligible for that, again, are people who've done a good job on attending the Zoom sessions, responding in the Zoom log, and explaining what they learned from the recorded sessions, as well as finishing and doing a great job on the 10 modules in the actual Canvas course. So those are some updates from questions that were asked at 4 o'clock. So I'm open to other questions before we finish off the last two standards, the national standards in the rubric, which, really include many of the other standards because they are focusing on professionalism and also ongoing professional learning that you want to keep updated yourself. And then we'll be open to, sharing anything else before our last session ends. So does anybody have any kind of question before we get started? Karina?
Yes, my question will be for the when is the next training level 1 that we can share with our peers? Today we had a very unfortunate situation just because one of the registrars didn't know the law, and it was very unfortunate because we have a student translate for her mom. The student didn't understand what the registrar was saying, and now we have a student who dropped out, and that could have been avoided by getting a proper translator to avoid miscommunication. So I talked to this person and I was explaining to her like how much I have learned from this. And my question was going to be that, is there going to be a next certification level 1? And when is that going to be?
Well, after October 15th, when the certificates are sent out to the people who have successfully completed this training, then the applications will go out November 1st. And the applications will be, the deadline for the applications will be January 15th. And then again, the next cohort will be cohort 2025. And they will begin just like we did this year on February 14th, after all the applications are approved and information is sent out.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Martha.
Hey, hi.
Hi, Martha.
So I am wondering, I sat in a meeting today as a participant, and I caught myself thinking, if I were to interpret this right now, I was feeling a little intimidated, but going a step further as we interpret and continue or begin or continue to apply these standards that we've been learning. How do I know I'm doing a good job? Because as a teacher, my principal comes and observes me, and provides feedback to me. Can you just speak to that? Because I know it's limited, like in IEP meetings, who can be in those meetings, but there are other opportunities for interpreting. How do I know? How can I get that feedback?
Well, the big thing is during the, Canvas course, every single standard asks you the question, what are you good at? What do you need more work on? And then when we look at the standards, the last two standards, it'll give you some ideas about how you can get feedback on your interpretation. So it's interesting that you're asking this question because it's actually connected to the last two standards that we'll talk about.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Martha.
Mhm.
Hassan?
I'm trying to mute, I promise.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
So my question is, as you mentioned before, ma'am, that this is gonna be our last Zoom meeting. Do you mean like we are not gonna have any other Zoom meeting after this time? As we have like 10 kind of like modules we have to go through the Zoom meetings. And you mentioned it's gonna be our last one.
No. Okay, so there are two different things. So this one are the in-person Zoom sessions, right? And then you have the Canvas course, which is 10 weeks long. So those things are totally separate.
Okay, so I mean, I just want to get a little bit more, make it for me, for myself, more specific. So the Zoom meetings will be no more, but we will have the others to continue.
Yeah, there won't be any Zoom meetings with me anymore at all, because
Okay.
the purpose of the Zoom meetings was to go over the standards, right? Which
Oh,
will
that
be,
may-
which is what this last course, this last session will be, because we have 2 more standards to actually address. So no more in-person Zoom sessions at all. This is the
So-
last one.
all right.
But enrolling in the Canvas course and doing the Canvas course for 10 weeks with all the assignments and the reading and the responses and all of that, that ends up going at your own pace. And the reason I do it at your own pace is because, there are things that come up. And so you might not be able to work on the assignments and, what's being asked of you in the Canvas courses, every single week. And so that's why I've made it broad enough so that people can do it at their own,
Okay.
at their own pace. 2 different things.
Cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So the next question, I just want to make it a little bit more clear. This one also for myself, and I appreciate that you are making it more specific for me and clear. The other 10, is this gonna be like we should do it like any day we can go and do that, or there should be a specific day or time that we have to go and do that?
No, it's open enrollment
Okay.
and it's at your own pace.
Okay.
So it's
Got
whenever,
it.
there's no deadline in relationship to,
Okay.
just so you know that. And what I'm focusing on really is I'm focusing on modules 1 and 2. Because
Okay.
everyone there are like 74 people who have registered, but there are only like 45 people who keep on answering. And so
Oh.
I'm not going to keep going back and forth, back and forth. I'm going to
Yeah.
actually focus and make sure that, all the people who have registered are responding to the questions in module 1 and then in module 2. So I do individual feedback for every single student in the Canvas course.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're
That was my questions, and I appreciate it. You made it more clear for me. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for asking the question.
My pleasure.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and remember, you just have to speak up and say that you can see it. And if you have a question about what we're looking at, then all you have to do is just speak up. Okay, so the first screen that I'm sharing is the last 2 standards with the ethical principle and the objectives. So I'm hoping you can see the screen.
I can see the screen.
Okay, thank you. And so these last 2 standards will kind of, they'll focus on some of the questions that just came up. So this first standard is professionalism, and obviously all the other standards are connected to, what it means to be a professional at all times and act in an ethical way. You have the confidential standard, you have the respect for all persons, you have the accountability standard. So all these standards are related to the behaviors of a professional. And the objective under that is the maintenance of professional conduct and comportment. Now, comportment is an interesting word. It's pretty awkward, but what it means is, your personal demeanor, the way in which you present yourself. And that's what comportment means. So again, underneath the standard of professionalism, you have the interpreter behaves in a manner consistent with professional standards, protocols, procedures. So when you're interpreting for a school in a team meeting, then that means that as a professional, you are really focused on the standards so that you are interpreting exactly what the administrator is saying. And if there's confusion, then it's your responsibility to make sure that it's the role of the administrator or whoever's leading the meeting to make it clear to the family. Your role is not to interpret and explain the meaning to the family. It's really the administrator or the person who is the leading the meeting to do that. The next objective is, again, the interpreter, when you're interpreting, unobtrusively means you're not the center of attention, right? It's the relationship between the person that you're, the educator or the administrator for whom you're interpreting, and the family. So unobtrusively means that you're not the center. You're not the center of the interest or the interaction, right? So you do it in a way where the focus is really on the two people that are communicating with each other. And again, the interpreter completes the assignments that she or he has accepted. And this goes back to one of the standards, about if there's a personal interest with the family or something is going on where it's a conflict of interest, then you have to actually declare that and talk to the administrator or the educator ahead of time and say, well, I have a very close relationship with this family, and it might be better that someone else is the interpreter. And then being as objective as possible without showing preferences to either one of the parties. The next ones are pretty obvious. You remain at the appointed location until the encounter ends or until it's dismissed. So it's hard to imagine that, there would be something, and number 40 goes with it, that, and 41, that it's a face-to-face encounter. And so when you have the time, when you're supposed to meet, and this also is connected to confidentiality, you're not telling people that you have this interpreter meeting and it's between this family because of this issue or whatever. Because remember, you have to maintain the privacy of the person that you're interpreting for and the family that you've been entrusted the confidentiality for. And again, this is, kind of obvious. The interpreter dresses appropriately in a business attire. So that means, that you're a professional and that you're going to kind of dress at what they call casual business, so that you're actually dressing in a way that communicates your professionalism. 41, I think, is really important, which goes back to this idea of, making sure that when you have an appointment to be an interpreter, that you don't let anything else interfere. So anything that's personal or other business or anything else that could distract you from the job of interpreting, you put away. An example is when I go visit schools and I visit classrooms, as soon as I come into the building, before I come into the building, I turn off my cell phone, because when I'm with people, I want to spend all my time and energy focusing on listening very clearly and specifically to what their needs are, and when I'm observing in a classroom, right? So I don't want to be distracted by anybody texting me or calling me on my cell phone or anything like that. So the whole goal, right, is to make sure that everything that's personal or is related to something else is taken care of before you actually are in the midst of your interpreting assignment. You want to really be focused on, what will be communicated in a way that is the benefit to the student. 42 is the interpreter creates a working environment conducive to performing interpretation over the telephone. We haven't talked very much about telephone interpretation, but the working environment actually means that when you're interpreting over the phone, you're not in the middle of all kinds of activity and distractions. And so, you know, it's an environment that's very similar to the face-to-face environment. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for a minute. Does anybody have any questions about the standard of professionalism or any comments or experiences that you've had? Karina?
Yeah, just a little comment on the one about the telephone translations. It's hard because sometimes things happen, and let's say a principal will call me, and this is about two students, and one of them is only Spanish speaker, and I'm on my car. And a while ago, I decided to like stop my car whenever something like this happens, just park somewhere and not drive anymore, because some of these phone conversations between principal, students, or parents that it's an emergency can go on for it's not fast, can go on for several minutes, and if I'm not paying attention to the conversation, it can be very chaotic for them, and it could also be chaotic for me if I'm not paying attention on the road. So that's something that I'm doing right now, because I do a lot of like translations over, well, interpretations over the phone.
Yeah, so Karina, that's a very good example. So if it's an emergency and someone needs you, you know, and you're in the car, obviously you're going to tell the person, I'm in the car, give me time to pull over and stop, and so that we can have, you know, an undisturbed conversation. So thank you for bringing that up. Jared, you have a comment?
There we go.
Ja-
Yes, so I've had similar experiences, the same as Karina. Just dealing with over the phone is sort of hard because people have different communication styles. And like what happened earlier with Mr. Isan, is that sometimes when you're communicating over the phone, or people have a tendency to talk over each other. And so it's hard for them to hear exactly what's being said because people are trying to jump in on the conversation. So I've done that many, many, many times. And so often I have to just take control of the meeting and say, okay, only one person speaks at a time, and then I will translate for whoever is speaking at the time. And I tell them it is difficult as a person who does interpreting, to be able to do multiple interpretations at the same time with different people speaking at the same time, because there's only one voice, my voice, that the other person may understand. And if I'm interpreting multiple conversations, it sounds sort of disjointed because of how people will communicate.
Yeah, Jared, I think that's a good point, and it goes back to this idea that mentioned, I think, last week in the standards about even when you're in person and there's a team and they're doing side conversations, you know, that never helps when there's a side conversation or people interrupting and talking over each other. And that's why kind of setting the norms in the beginning about, you know, this is my role as the interpreter, and to do it effectively so you better understand what people are saying, you know, I'm only going to interpret what people are saying one person at a time, so that you can really understand what you're saying to each other. And so that sets the tone for a standard, right, for understanding based on, as you say, you know, people have different communication styles. And so then it ends up being doubly challenging for the interpreter. Perfect example. Thanks, Jared. Martha.
Yes, just referring to Karina's comment, thinking about like propriety and so forth, and being able to decline a request for interpreting, just working within the school. I just see that, oh, we need an interpreter right now, you know, and so we can be the direct go-to, where there's not much room to decline interpreting. So I'm just thinking about that, and in declining interpreting outside of a rush situation, you know, if we decline as within our school building, who does our school go to, or who can our school reach out to for interpreting if, like, I am the only bilingual person in my school? So can you speak to that? Would you please?
Yeah, the only reason you would actually decline would be that there's a conflict of interest. Like, remember, we went over the standards, and there's a family that you know very personally, and you're a little worried about that, right? So it's not that you would,
Yes.
you know, that you would decline everything, because if you're the only interpreter, then that puts you in a challenging place. I mean, the other way to mitigate that is to make sure that in your school, when you talk to people, that they have made a commitment to ensure that they have an interpreting program like Proprio or other programs that can be used for interpretation, because it's really, remember, it's a state law. It's their responsibility to ensure that interpretation services are available. So it's not a matter of choice for them. It's a state law. So,
Okay.
so that's the other thing I would say.
Would you please name that program again?
Proprio, Proprio. Proprio. It's there are a lot of districts that have it. Ogden has it. Murray has it. Alpine has it. And it's you can look it up, but you know, if you email me, I can connect you with people who are using it effectively. Murray is a good example, Murray School District, because they've trained their teachers on using Proprio. And it's on a cell phone, and they can do immediate translation for any of the 100 languages that we have. So there's actually no excuse for people putting pressure on one person to do all the interpreting. There are all kinds of ways that you can mitigate that, problem.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Karina?
Yeah, this is just one comment, and I'm pretty sure some of you probably already did it. I am like the only one in my district that does translations and interpretations, but I have help. We created an interpreted list for many languages, and we send that to the principals all around my district, just in case, for example, I'm not available or there's an emergency or I can't pick up. They will have someone to call, not only in Spanish but in other languages. And we also use Propio, but sometimes they would prefer a person to do interpretations. So that has been very helpful, having that list and sharing it. I don't know, like that's something we did that has helped.
Thanks, Corinna. That's, I think, very important, because again, it goes back to this idea of, okay, the state law has been, in force since 2022, but most of the districts have been very slow to implement it and use resources in a way to make better decisions so that the law can be implemented. So that, I think that piece is really important. And it's always good to learn, from each other and from other districts. Okay, so let's go on to the next standard, which is so this piece is important because it goes to this idea of someone emailing me and saying, well, do we have to renew our certificate? Okay, so this is called continued competence, and it's very similar to this idea of what it means to be a professional. So interpreters commit themselves to lifelong learning, recognizing that languages, individuals, services evolve and change over time. So, someone who wants to be a competent interpreter strives to really maintain the quality of the interpretation services that you provide. An example is the way in which the modules are organized. The modules are organized that in the discussion, you actually look at the standard, the principle, and the objectives, and you identify what you feel competent in doing and what you need more practice in. So this is an example that goes to this issue about, how do you become better? So you have demonstration of certifications. Okay, so you're going to have your own certificate, USBE certificate for level 1. you actually have, years of experience that you have worked in an educational setting, so you have experience. I would really recommend that you go online and look for, if you haven't done this already, a template for a resume that will show your experiences and your certification and what you do to improve your skills. And so here's some suggestions. The interpreter takes available courses, which you would look for on your own, examinations to obtain accreditation or certification. So you'll have your initial certification after you successfully complete courses at the end of September. The interpreter maintains and expands skills through self-teaching, formal and informal continuing education. So one of the things I think that's really wonderful is this idea of self-teaching, which again means that you're setting goals for yourself based on what you want to work on, what you personally want to work on. That's what self-teaching is all about. And as I mentioned before, after every interpretation experience, you could ask the facilitator for feedback on one of the objectives that you're working on. This is the practice of self-evaluation. So, and I'm thinking, that I can develop this feedback form for you and put it on the in the module, the last module, and you can use it as getting feedback on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 3 or whatever as a survey. And that can help you develop. And the reason I'm saying feedback is important is that, feedback from different perspectives. So feedback from the family, feedback from the administrator, from the teacher, from, the people that you're working with and you're doing interpretation for is really valuable. When I'm in the Stanford course on writing, and we have 7 colleagues there, the assignment is to submit 5,000 words of writing, and then everyone in the course is required to read your writing and give you really strong, direct feedback. And so the goal is to always be a learner. And if you're always a learner, then you're creating collaborative partnerships so that you can get the kind of feedback that will help you be more skillful. So that's the last part of the standards. Do you have any questions related to either professionalism or continuing competency before we go on to the next part? Karina.
Yeah, I kind of want to share something on how different my job has been ever since I started this training. So this week, I was at a meeting with a parent and intervention, and the principal asked me if I could run the meeting, just because we previously talked on the phone about what we were gonna talk about the parents about. And as soon as we were over there, she was like, "So can you start?" And then I used the opportunity to be like, I'm just here to do translations. You are the principal, and I will very happy translate or interpret whatever you want to tell to the parents. And
Good.
maybe a few months ago, I would have run the meeting or go ahead and explain whatever the principal told me on the phone. But yeah, now it's different. Now I put limits, and those limits help the ones around me to have a better understanding of the situation or school, or I don't know, many other things. So I am very grateful for this opportunity, and very thankful for everything I have learned.
Thanks, Karina. I think that goes back to this idea of knowing the purpose of your role as an interpreter and supporting the education people in understanding their role, which is their responsibility. They're accountable for communicating clearly what will be interpreted to families so families understand what they can do that's best for their child. Right? So that's really an excellent point. Corinna, did you want to say one more thing?
No, sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, so the last module in the Canvas course is a final self-assessment on the 8 standards. Now, I'm going to explain why this is so important. It's a final self-assessment. It's not me assessing you, it's your assessment of yourself. And so it's asking, and it'll be really detailed about the expectations, a 1-page essay on the following 2 questions. It might be two clear paragraphs. And I'll explain, in the assignment in the module, the font and the spacing and stuff like that. Which of the 2 8 standards do you feel most confident and why? Please refer to specific objectives. So you might feel really confident now in the accountability, standard, and there are certain objectives under there. So the question is, what do you feel most confident of the 8 standards? It could be so I've asked you that 2 of the 8 standards. So you would explain which of the 8 standards, 2 of them, that you feel the most confident in, and then you would refer specifically to at least 1 or 2 of the objectives. And then on which one standard. So the first one is the 2 standards that you feel confident about. And then on which one standard do you need to work on and why? And which of the objectives do you want to focus on? So the final assessment is an attempt to help you set your own personal goals for your ongoing professional learning. That's why this final assessment is really important, because it's for you. It's for you to set your direction and what you want to accomplish, which is, incredibly valuable because you're setting it yourself, because you know yourself better than anyone else does. And then you would, upload the Zoom attendance log. And then on October 15th, there would be the notification for awarding the level 1 certificates after completion of the Canvas courses. So do you have any questions on that before we go to the special ed issue related to summer school and extended learning? Okay. So let me see if I can pull this up. Okay, you'll have to wait just for a second. Okay, so let me know if you can see this.
I can see it.
Okay, great. So this goes to the question that people asked me a couple of weeks ago, and I got together with Kim Fratto at USBE. At the end of an IEP meeting, the person who was leading the meeting said that the student was not eligible for extended school year services. So this document, which I'll make available to you so that you can download and print and keep, explains, it's a technical assistance document that explains how those decisions are made. Now, remember, this does not apply to summer school. Anybody can go to summer school. This is related to the goals in the IEP meeting and certain data that are used and the criteria that is used by special educators to determine whether extended school year services can be used in a certain period related to the goals of the IEP. So if you look at this, I'm going to show you the table of contents. Now, what we're going to do is, we're not going to go through this, but Kim Fratto, because she's a specialist, she's a coordinator and she really understands this. And when I was meeting with her, we talked for a very long time because of the language that's being used for making these decisions. So in this technical assistance, what we'll do is she and I are going to record a session where she talks through the criteria and the purposes and, you know, everything in this table of contents to help you better understand so that you can better communicate after the IEP meeting when the facilitator is trying to explain why the student does not qualify, is not eligible for extended services. So in the outline, it talks about, you know, ideas related to the IEP team, and then what actually is extended services, what's the purpose, and again, the question that we talked about before is who may be eligible for these services, and how do IEP teams, the teams, determine whether services are necessary, and then how can they be delivered, when can they be delivered, what amount of service is needed based on the IEP goals, who is eligible to provide those services, and where can they be delivered, and then documentation that's required. So this technical assistance manual, I think, really is going to respond to the questions that we had previously about what happened in an IEP meeting when the parent ended up being frustrated because she didn't know why her student was not eligible. And then I think apparently she assumed that that meant that her student actually couldn't go to summer school, which is not true, because summer school is open to everyone. Okay, so I'm going to stop there, but I just want to tell you what a privilege it's been because the things that you actually bring up, your comments and your experiences help me connect with, you know, other people in USBE who have no idea. I mean, they generally just, they really, and it's no one's fault, but they don't have any idea what's actually happening in some of those meetings, in the student support meetings or the IEP meetings or the behavior meetings. They don't really know. And so the way in which you have been so open and generous with your experiences has made a huge difference. Another example is that the governor asked his director of the New American Task Force that the governor is running to do an update. And the update was about the increase in students learning English. And so she's a wonderful person. So I ended up getting the data in relationship to the increased number of newcomers and the increased number of refugees and immigrants and other students who are learning English and the needs that they have with their families based on state legislation, you know, for a very long time, as long as 1970s and 1960s, with the Title III funding, it has always been a focus that free public education, no matter what your immigration status is available for any student in any public school. And so now that we have state legislation, it ends up even being more important for us to bring up these issues to people who can make a difference in the opportunities that all of our students have. So any other comments or questions before we close our last session? So I just want to thank each of you personally. I look forward to reading all your reflections and your discussion posts in the Canvas course. I've learned so much from you and with you. And I'm excited that we can grow this program so that every single student learning English in Utah and their families have the best opportunity for a quality education. So thank you so much from, the deepest part of my heart with the deepest appreciation. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We appreciate your hard working with us. So that's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for